The first red flag wasn't Chad's smug little smirk. It was the fact that the email summoned me to the HR office at 7:58 a.m. with no subject line and the word ASAP typed in all caps like a panicked toddler trying to play grown-up. I hadn't even finished my second coffee when I walked in and saw the kid already perched in my usual chair, like he owned the air in the room. Chad Harrison, all 28 years of entitlement squeezed into a slim-fit blazer and overpriced haircut, didn't even look up when I entered. He just tapped a pen against his teeth like he was waiting for Postmates. "Not about to gut the heart of the company, Ruby," he said, drawing out the words like they offended him. "Thanks for coming in early. We'll keep this brief." The HR rep sat tight in the corner like a hostage, no eye contact. That's when I knew I didn't need the speech. Of course, Chad gave it anyway. After reviewing departmental efficiencies, he began, using a phrase he definitely read off LinkedIn that morning. "We've concluded your role has become non-essential. We're streamlining legacy costs and bringing in fresh perspectives. Effective immediately, you're relieved of your duties." He actually smiled like he just solved world hunger by axing the woman who kept this entire data analytics operation from collapsing into flaming chaos. I didn't flinch. No begging, no angry monologue. I just adjusted my blazer, slid the company-issued laptop across the table like I was handing him a dead goldfish, and stood. "Streamline this," I muttered, inaudible just for me, and walked out with more grace than he'd ever earn. It's funny. You work somewhere for 15 years, bleed into the cracks of its foundation, clean up its messes, save its ass during every merger panic. One kid with a business degree and daddy's password can erase you before 9 a.m. And hey, before I forget, if you've ever been kicked in the teeth by some Chad in your life and kept walking, help me hit my first ever 10,000 subscribers. You'd be surprised what kind of revenge we can cook up with just a story and a little support. Back in my office, well, former office, I grabbed my box of things. Photos of my dogs, a framed quote from my mother. "Don't get even, get everything." And a flash drive taped under the drawer with a label that just read Clause 12C. I didn't cry, didn't cuss, just walked out through the same glass door I'd opened every morning for a decade and a half. But this time, I didn't badge out. I paused, smiled at the receptionist, and said, "Don't bother disabling my login just yet." The kid thought he'd cut the head off a relic. He didn't know he just unplugged the power source. The box was still warm from the car ride home, rattling softly as I set it down in my dining room right next to the half-dead orchid and the unopened bottle of Merlot I'd been saving for a win. This wasn't the win I had in mind, but it would do. I didn't go for the wine. Not yet. Instead, I crossed the living room to a tall, nondescript cabinet no one but me had ever opened. I slid the panel to the side, keyed in a 6-digit code that hadn't changed in 15 years, and waited for the mechanical click. The drawer inside groaned open like it hadn't been touched in a decade, which was only partially true. The documents inside were pristine, archived like sacred scrolls. I flipped past old W-2s, 2 performance reviews from a VP that cried when he got laid off, and a sealed envelope labeled Harrison Original. Inside was the contract. Back when this company was one bad quarter away from bankruptcy, I hadn't just stepped up. I rebuilt half their data analytics operations from scratch. Wrote the algorithm logic for their market prediction system in my own damn living room while eating cold Chinese takeout and dodging creditors. I hadn't asked for a bonus. I'd asked for something smarter. And Chad's father, Mr. Harrison, the real CEO, not the sperm donor in a suit I'd met this morning, smart enough to give it to me. Clause 12C. It didn't look like much on paper. 3 paragraphs buried between arbitration procedures and standard non-disclosures. But I remembered every word. IP rights to any custom software I authored on my own equipment. A 2.5% equity stake if the company hit a certain revenue threshold, which it had 3 years ago with no payout. The kicker: all executive restructuring decisions must be approved by my signature if I was employed at the time and if my systems were still in use. Check and check. I didn't rage. I didn't pace. I just pulled out my phone, opened the scanner app, and got to work. Scan, save, encrypt. One copy to my personal inbox, one to my employment attorney who'd helped me write the damn clause, and one to Eleanor Vance, board member since year 7, who once told me over crab cakes, "If the boys ever turn on you, send me proof, and I'll handle the knives." By the time the attachments hit my sent folder, I was already drafting a bullet point summary of current systems running on Harrison Analytics Protocol, my original code base. It was still in use. I knew that without checking. They'd only just renamed it Chad Analytics a year ago, like that could erase my fingerprints from the code. I closed the cabinet, locked it again, and took the Merlot from the table, poured myself half a glass. I didn't toast. I calculated. Tomorrow wouldn't be about proving Chad wrong. It would be about making the entire board remember why I was never someone you could just streamline. Mr. Harrison returned to the office on a dreary Tuesday with a stitched-up gut, a short fuse, and the creeping realization that leaving his son in charge for even a week was like handing a toddler a chainsaw and hoping for lawn art. His assistant, Brenda, stone-faced, 65, and terrifying, met him at the elevator with a stack of papers and a post-it note that simply said, "You'll want coffee first." The moment he stepped into his office, he saw it. My scanned contract, printed in triplicate, neatly clipped, and placed dead center on his mahogany desk like a legal landmine. His heart sank before he even read the header. Clause 12C was circled in red. There was a brief flicker of hope. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe I was just making noise trying to leverage sympathy on my way out. But then he saw the signature at the bottom. His signature, notarized. The date matched the week after their data center crash. I had pulled the entire company out of the flames with a system I built on a laptop older than Chad's last girlfriend. He sank into his chair, stomach knotting again, but this time not from surgery. "Brenda," he said. She poked her head in, already texted him, "He's coming." Mr. Harrison didn't say thank you. He just rubbed his temples and stared at the clause again, reading it like it was a death sentence he'd written himself. And maybe it was. A knock. Chad breathed in, all swagger and Spotify confidence. "Welcome back, old man. Glad to see you survived." Mr. Harrison didn't look up. "Did you fire Ruby Langston?" "Yeah, don't worry. Totally legit. HR signed off. Her role's ancient, and frankly, she was kind of dead weight." Chad plopped into the guest chair, leg bouncing. "You're always saying we need to cut costs." "Well, I cut." Mr. Harrison looked up slowly, eyes narrowing. "Did you read her contract before you did it?" Chad shrugged. "What for? It's like 100 pages of boomer legalese. She's bluffing. I mean, she emailed the board with some old PDF, probably hoping for payout. Bitter ex-employee move." Mr. Harrison slid the papers across the desk. Chad picked them up like he was being handed a menu. "Clause 12, paragraph C," Mr. Harrison said, voice dry as sand. "She has veto rights over structural changes, including terminations. And if her software is still being used, which it is, firing her without board review constitutes breach." Chad blinked. "Wait, what? That can't be real. That's insane. Why would you give her that? Because 15 years ago, your father was bleeding money, and Ruby wrote a data analytics system that saved this company from folding like a damn lawn chair in a hurricane," Mr. Harrison snapped. "That clause is real. So is the equity. So is the IP. And if she presses this, she doesn't just get her job back. She owns part of your job now." Chad paled. "But I already filed termination. Her severance is processed. Then you better pray she doesn't cash it." For the first time since Chad strutted into the role like it was gifted to him in a Happy Meal, Mr. Harrison saw something crack. That twitch behind the eyes. The sound of wheels turning, slow, rusty, and terrified. Mr. Harrison leaned back, exhaled through his nose. Ruby doesn't make noise unless she's already pulled the trigger. If she's contacted Eleanor Vance. He let that hang. They both knew Eleanor didn't play. The silence that followed was thick. Chad stood, fists clenching and unclenching, the reality finally dripping through the holes in his designer armor. Mr. Harrison tapped the contract. You didn't fire an employee, Chad. You declared war on the wrong goddamn general. It started small. The kind of hiccups nobody notices until they stack like dirty dishes in a bachelor's sink. On Wednesday, a data analytics order for a Seattle client didn't show. The client called twice, furious by the third ring. Thursday, 2 invoices went missing in the system, just vanished like they'd never existed. Friday, the West Data Hub routed a shipment of sensitive data to Canada instead of California, costing the company $6,000 in rush corrections and an apology email that read like it had been written by a sleep-deprived intern with a concussion. Each incident on its own was manageable, but together they were the exact kind of paper cuts I had spent 15 years cauterizing before anyone felt a sting. Now they bled freely. Meanwhile, the office buzzed with that sick little energy that comes when a storm's coming and you don't know who packed an umbrella. My name wasn't spoken loudly, but it was everywhere. In the break room, in Slack threads disguised as memes, in whispers over frozen lean cuisines and passive-aggressive post-its. Did you see the clause? Someone murmured by the printer. She had IP rights or something, right? That's like serious. I heard she emailed the board before she even left the parking lot. Wait, Chad fired her? That little golem? My cousins in legal said it might breach contract. Like, breach. Eleanor Vance didn't respond to gossip. She didn't have to. The mere fact that she hadn't publicly defended Chad said enough. People noticed. People always noticed when Eleanor went quiet, like the forest right before a cougar jumps. And then came the kicker. It was Leo, junior dev turned systems analyst, soft-spoken, smarter than he let on, and terrified of confrontation. He'd been tasked with reviewing internal code dependencies before their next warehouse software update. 2 hours into the audit, he found it. A line of code inside their automated load balancing script, adapted from original RLP. Ruby's Logic Protocol. Copyright R. Langston. He stared at it for a solid minute, then searched the devlogs. I hadn't just written the original structure. My protocols were the structure. Repackaged, renamed, sure, but the skeleton, the DNA of that beast humming in their data logistics chain, all mine. Leo did what any smart junior did in a corporate horror movie. He quietly screenshotted everything, zipped it in a folder labeled just in case, slipped the printout onto his manager's desk with a sticky note that said, "Think we owe Ruby royalties." That sticky note made it 3 desks over by lunch. HR saw it by 3 p.m. Legal by 5. By Monday, Mr. Harrison's inbox had 15 different threads with the subject line, "Urgent, Langston IP rights." I never said a word, never tweeted, never posted some vague God closes a door status on LinkedIn. I didn't have to. Absence was its own form of presence, like a missing beam in a house you thought was sound, until the roof sagged. No tantrums, no threats, just quiet chaos. And somewhere behind all those flickering monitors and stressed-out middle managers praying Chad didn't call another town hall, one truth became colder than fact. Ruby Langston wasn't just a former employee. I was now a loaded gun the company had tossed onto the boardroom table and dared not pick up. Subject line, Notice of Contract Breach. Clause 12C, IP Ownership Review sent at 6:02 a.m. Just as the building lights flickered on in half the suites that still had pillow creases on their cheeks, my timing was always surgical. The email was short, 5 paragraphs, 0 fluff, no angry language, no frothing demands, just precision. Dear board members, on termination date, I was informed without prior board consultation or approval that my role had been eliminated. As outlined in my employment contract, Clause 12C, such restructuring actions are subject to approval due to active deployment of Langston Analytics Protocol, LFP, architecture, and associated IP. This termination occurred while said systems remained in core operational use and without formal consent. For your reference, I've attached documentation of IP contributions, active code fragments still in live deployment, and a signed copy of the original agreement. While I trust this was an administrative oversight, the legal implications of breach and royalty delinquency compel clarification. I remain available for resolution discussions. Attachments: Langston, Original Contract, PDF, LFP IP, Overview, PDF, Data Ops Code Excerpt PDF. I CC'd no one from HR, no one from Chad's team, just the board. Then I stood up from my kitchen table, poured myself the last of the Merlot, and started making my avocado toast like it was any other day. Because for me, it was. This was routine. This was what happened when someone mistook silence for surrender. By 8 a.m., the replies began. The first was from Sarah Chen, compliance watchdog and notorious hawk. 4 words: "When are you available?" The second from Eleanor Vance: "We need to talk soon." At 8:37 a.m., someone blind copied me an internal thread titled Urgent Review, Termination Protocols, plus Royalty Risk Exposure. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. I knew what would happen next. I counted on it. At 9:10 a.m., a quiet panic swept through the top floor. Boardroom doors closed early. Schedules cleared. Someone canceled Chad's 10 a.m. vision for the future webinar without telling him. Mr. Harrison walked in with a manila folder and a look that said, "I'm about to eat my own mistakes." Legal had already started pulling documentation, reviewing every signature Chad had scrolled since I walked out. NDA updates, vendor renewals, a new partnership with a supply chain analytics firm built on software still running my code. And that's when they saw it. Not only had I been fired without board consent, Chad had greenlit a system overhaul that quietly duplicated my original framework without compensation or attribution. The term willful infringement began floating between inboxes. So did malicious restructuring. One attorney even wrote the phrase, "She's not just owed back pay, she may be owed equity corrections retroactively." Outside the glass walls, Chad smiled for some social media intern's photo op about innovation culture. Inside, a different kind of innovation was unfolding. An unscheduled audit, a flurry of legal memos, and the first whispers of board-level dissatisfaction no PR filter could fix. I still hadn't replied, because power doesn't knock twice. It lets itself in when you least expect it, wearing silence like a suit and holding receipts sharp enough to cut careers in half. Chad found out about the private board session the same way he found out about most things lately, by being the last to know in a building his father still technically owned. He'd strolled into the executive lounge mid-morning, caramel oat milk latte in one hand, phone in the other, flipping through LinkedIn influencers like they were fortune cookies. That's when he saw it. Eleanor Vance walking into conference room B with Mr. Harrison, Sarah, and the entire legal team in tow. No invite, no heads up, no courtesy loop you in from Brenda. She always used to greet him like royalty. She walked right past him this time with a folder marked Langston IP Clause 12. Something inside Chad shifted, a flicker of something unfamiliar just beneath the teeth-grinding arrogance. It was cold, wet, panic-shaped. He power-walked back to his office, slammed the door harder than he meant to, and dialed my number. Ring ring, voicemail. He tried again, straight to voicemail. Left a message this time. "Hey Ruby, I think we maybe got off on the wrong foot. Just wanted to talk, maybe figure this out privately. Call me back, okay?" Even he didn't believe it. His voice cracked halfway through privately. 15 minutes later, a reply arrived. Not from me, but from my old autoresponder, still set up on my personal Gmail. Thank you for your message. I'm currently unavailable. If this is urgent, please contact someone who didn't call me non-essential. Chad slammed his phone down and knocked over a glass paperweight, shattering it into jagged little reminders that he was, in fact, not in control. Then came the final nail. He stormed down to DevOps, breathing like a cartoon bull, demanding Leo, the junior analyst who'd uncovered the code tags, show me the damn system logs. Leo, mid-diet soda and visibly shaking, opened a terminal and pulled up the live ops script. Chad stared at line after line of code, not really understanding what he was seeing until Leo highlighted a tag. Copyright D. Langston, LFP Core Logic v2.4, do not modify without legal clearance. And below that, use of this software without licensing agreement constitutes breach of IP ownership terms. It was baked in, not just one tag, hundreds. Watermarked, MER data, nested code version logs, all of it traceable. I hadn't just built the system. I'd branded it like cattle. Quiet, legal, unforgiving. What if we, rewrote the code? Chad asked, lips twitching. I mean, just reformat it. Quick fix. Leo blinked, frozen mid-keystroke. Sir, that's fraud. Who said anything about fraud? I'm just saying we modernize. Okay, get creative. Maybe with a bonus? Chad tossed out the word like he'd seen it in a movie where bribes worked. Leo's silence was louder than any whistle. By 4:00 p.m., Leo had emailed HR, CC'd legal, and attached a transcript of Chad's modernization idea with one simple line at the top. This made me uncomfortable. Please advise. It didn't take long for that to reach Eleanor, or Mr. Harrison, or the board session Chad still hadn't been invited to. By 5:15 p.m., Chad's keycard had been quietly downgraded. Not revoked, just adjusted. He didn't notice yet, but he would, because desperation smells like fear. And fear, when it starts to rot, draws attention. The kind that eats empires. Mr. Harrison didn't knock. He stood outside my front door longer than any self-respecting CEO should, holding a manila folder like it was a hostage ransom. Dressed not in the crisp suit he wore to battle investors, but in slacks and a windbreaker, like a man who knew this wasn't business anymore. It was cleanup. I opened the door slowly. No smile, no welcome. Just that surgical stillness I wore like armor. 5 minutes, Mr. Harrison said. Then I'll go. I let him in without a word. The house was the same as he remembered. Clean lines, muted tones, nothing flashy except the dining table spread with neatly stacked legal docs, case studies, a framed photo of me and my dogs at a beach, and a yellow legal pad covered in handwritten bullet points that looked less like notes and more like a war map. I didn't offer coffee. He didn't ask. I was wrong, Mr. Harrison started, eyes low. I never should have let him near that seat. I thought giving him a taste would scare him straight, humble him. I didn't think he'd gut the company, destroy the one person who kept it from collapsing 10 times over. I finished, voice flat. Added, yeah, that too. Silence. I didn't blink, didn't sigh, just reached down and slid a folder across the table. Reinstatement offer, I said. Effective immediately. Back pay for 6 months. Retroactive equity adjustment to reflect the performance milestones hit using my IP and a 2-year licensing contract for all current and derivative systems under my terms. Mr. Harrison didn't open it. He just stared at it like it was a loaded pistol. If you don't sign it, I continued, I'll walk into Carrington Freight's office tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. I've already had coffee with their CTO. He knows what I built, knows what I still own, and he's very interested in acquiring licensing rights. Especially now that we both know your board is legally exposed. You'd burn it all? Mr. Harrison asked, voice soft, almost pleading. I tilted my head. No, I'd simply charge what it's worth. It hit him then. I hadn't come for revenge. I'd come for balance, for order, for respect. And I'd built my case, brick by brick, with the same precision I used to rewire his data network during the 2008 collapse. "You don't want the role back?" he asked, cautious. "No," I said, "not like it was. But I'll take something better, something cleaner." He nodded, hands trembling slightly as he reached for a pen. "I'll handle Chad," Mr. Harrison said, almost to himself. "He's still my son, but I held up a hand, calm, icy. "No, let him face the board first." I leaned back, expression unreadable. Let him learn what it feels like to be declared non-essential by people who actually read the paperwork. Mr. Harrison looked up, eyes tired. "You always said you didn't believe in revenge," he said. I smiled for the first time. "I don't," I said. "I believe in consequences." Chad strutted into the boardroom like it was a TED Talk he hadn't rehearsed for, but felt confident he could wing. He wore his trademark half-smirk and a blazer tight enough to signal thought leader. Eyes flicking from face to face, looking for a smile. None came. The room was quiet, not tense, not angry, just still, like the space between lightning and thunder. And then he saw me. I sat at the far end of the table, calm, unmoved, closed folder in front of me, fingers laced like a courtroom witness who already knew the verdict. I didn't look at him, didn't flinch. Chad's smirk faltered. He adjusted his collar and cleared his throat. "Morning, everyone. Excited to share some updates." "No need," Eleanor cut in without looking up from the folder in her lap. "We've already had a very enlightening morning." Chad blinked. "Sorry?" Sarah, seated beside her, lifted a page. "Read aloud. Clause 12C. No structural or leadership changes, including termination or reassignment, shall be executed without written consent of Miss Langston if company operations are utilizing intellectual property authored or designed by her during active employment." She paused. Which they were, which they are. Next, the board's legal counsel spoke. Per discovery, 70% of current data analysis system operations utilize proprietary code structures built off the Langston Protocol. Attempts to alter this code would require 6 months and full relicensing clearance. I still said nothing. Mr. Harrison sat at the head of the table, eyes forward, hands folded, not defending, not condemning, just watching. Chad laughed, dry, unconvincing. "Okay, but look, we're all on the same team here. Ruby, you could have just talked to me, didn't need to drag the whole board into." I finally moved, slowly, calmly. I opened my folder, slid a flash drive across the polished wood. "Press play," I said. My voice was quiet, but razor sharp. Sarah inserted the drive. The screen behind them flickered on. Footage played. A clean, high-speed walkthrough of the company's data automation dashboard. Real-time routing, load balance projections, predictive delays, every feature humming like a goddamn Tesla engine. At the bottom right corner, barely visible but permanent, was the watermark, powered by D. Langston IP Holdings. A long silence, the kind that makes careers die. Then the CFO spoke. 3 vendors have already reached out. 1 is preparing legal action over failure to disclose IP rights in system contracts. If we don't resolve this, we're staring down breach litigation, royalty payouts, and license restructuring at scale. Chad's jaw twitched. "Okay, so what? You're siding with her over me?" "No," Eleanor said. "We're siding with the company over the liability." Then she turned to me. "Miss Langston, have your terms changed?" I nodded once, only in delivery speed. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "We've reviewed and approved her reinstatement pending board sign-off." Effective immediately, she will resume under her new title, Executive Director of Systems Integrity with Independent Oversight Privileges. The vote passed unanimous, but I didn't reach for the contract. Instead, I stood, adjusted my blazer. I appreciate the offer, I said, but I won't be returning. A ripple of surprise. I met Mr. Harrison's eyes. I already took another meeting, Carrington Freight. They made me an offer I'd be a fool to refuse. Full licensing autonomy. No Harrisons involved. Chad opened his mouth to speak. I cut him off with a glance that hit harder than any scream. Then I gathered my folder, headed to the door, and paused. Whoever replaces me, I said, not looking back, start by changing the system passwords. I don't trust what's still in his inbox. And with that, I left, calm, complete, untouchable. Chad slumped into a chair, sweat creeping through his designer collar as the board began quietly discussing interim leadership. No one asked his opinion. They never would again. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. The lesson from this story is the importance of dedication, intellect, and perseverance. Ruby didn't just work hard, she had foresight, protecting her work with smart legal clauses. The story conveys the message that a person's true worth isn't in a title or fleeting recognition, but in sustainable contributions and the ability to advocate for oneself against injustice. Ultimately, strategic silence and calculated action can be more powerful than any words or outrage. Believe in your self-worth, prepare meticulously, and let the results speak for themselves.